Okay, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can go through little steps of making sourdough bread. Now, as you see in the first picture here, I have a loaf of sourdough bread in a French type loaf, and then I also have a loaf in the regular sandwich type loaf. Now, what you start off with is you go to your refrigerator and take out your sourdough starter. And your sourdough starter, in my case, I have two kinds. I'm going to use the one in the bowl there because I don't have a second crock, but it's from Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, about 100 years old. And the other one is an old San Francisco sourdough starter. And all it is flour, water, and the yeast that's in the air. And once you take your sourdough starter, you get a big mixing bowl and make sure it's ceramic, and you have a wooden spatula of some sort, and you take about a cup to a cup and a half maybe, and you put it in your mixing bowl. Then once you have that, and you see what it kind of looks like here, you then add 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of water. And so you see the water, and you add those, maybe just a cup and 3/4 of water, maybe just a little. Sometimes 2 cups, 1 to 1 is fine. So if you put 2 cups flour, 2 cups water is great. Some people put just a little bit less water than flour. I find it doesn't make that much difference. And then you mix that up real good. If it's a little bit lumpy, that's okay. It doesn't bother it. It will eat it all up. And then you take your sourdough starter, whether it's in a crock or a bowl, cover it up, and then you put that back in the fridge. You take your sourdough starter flour and water mixture and you cover that then with a tea towel. And sometimes a little bit moist doesn't hurt. I don't normally do that, but you can. And then when it's cold outside and it's colder in the house, like less than 80 degrees, I take an old chicken light. It's a ceramic light. It's good for heat. And I'll put a 40-watt light bulb in there, and then I'll put that in the oven, and then put my sourdough water flour mixture in along with it. Close the oven up. Make sure you put the cord over the front of the oven, so for some reason you don't come by and turn the oven on when the light fixture's in there. But it'll keep it right about 80 to 90 degrees, and you're going to let that set overnight. And you can see here it's about 80 degrees or so. So you need a good thermometer. These are not good inside the oven. They're just for measuring temperature outside. It's a plastic dome on those little thermometers. I do have an oven thermometer. Those are important too, as you can see there. But these thermometers are good just to stick in there, get the temperature, and take it out. Otherwise, that plastic dome cover will melt. If you, when you get one of these thermometers, you need to calibrate it. You get a big glass completely full of ice, crushed if you can, and then fill it full of water and stick that in there. And then there's a big nut on the back of it, and you can get it right to 32 degrees. Likewise, you could stick it in boiling water and make sure that it's 212. Then you'll stick your sourdough starter back in the fridge, waiting for you to get done. And the next day, the next morning somehow, or depending on when you start it and how warm it is, your sourdough starter should be turned into a sponge and should look something like this. And you can see the air bubbles, and it's really sponged up. Make sure you're using a wooden spatula and it's ceramic. There's another picture of it. It looks pretty good. This is real spongy. This is what you're looking for. And then once you have the sponge all made, which could have taken overnight, then you're going to take and add back to your sourdough starter what you took out originally. Well, there was a cup and a half, and so forth. And so you add that back and you mix that up good, and then you take your sourdough starter, put it back in the fridge. Then you have your sourdough sponge left over, and you're going to add 2 cups of flour, but you're going to add 1 cup and a half, at least initially here. So 1.5 cups of flour and a good tablespoon of salt. And you'll notice I'm using sea salt, which is always good. You could use non-iodized salt, kind of like the sea salt, but a pretty good teaspoon of salt. Remember, this is 1 loaf of bread, so that should be enough. And then I've saved off about 1/2 cup of that 2 cups of flour, and I'll use that for kneading the bread and working it down. And you can see there. And then you'll mix in the 1.5 cups of flour to your sourdough sponge. Mix it up real good. Notice I'm using again a wooden, in this case bamboo spatula. And it's mixing around. And then you take a little bit of your 1/2 cup of flour left over and flour your table for kneading. And you dump out the dough mixture onto the surface, and then you start kneading it with the heels of your hands. You're going to flatten it out and then fold it double back on itself like this, and then flatten it out and double back on itself, and you're going to do that for at least 13 minutes. You will know when the bread dough has become elastic. When it starts getting elastic is what you want. Then you probably go a minute or 2 after that. It might take 13 minutes. It might take 15. It might feel real elastic at 12, just depending on your kneading technique and so forth. But if you don't have a real good knead and it's really becoming elastic, and you can tell the difference, you knead it for 15 minutes, chances are you're going to tell the difference. And you'll say, oh, this is what I was doing wrong. Because if your bread is real coarse texture, then you're probably not kneading it enough, or it's not rising correctly. So make sure you get at least 13 minutes of good kneading in. And I would do this by hand for that long. I think the hand is better. I have a good mixer, one of those mixers with the bread hook, but the old-fashioned doing it by hand for 13 to 15 minutes is going to be better. And I kind of work my way, kind of like you're massaging real deep muscles or something. Just push and push and push and push and push across it, flatten it out, fold it back on itself, knead it some more, and eventually it will kind of turn. You'll see it turn real elastic. You can hold it up, stretch it out real thin, and kind of see through it actually. And this looks kind of flat, but it's starting to come around. And as you're doing this, you're adding a little bit more flour to it just to keep it from being too sticky on your fingers and hands and the table and so forth. And probably by the time you're done, you're through with that other half a cup of flour. And so it'll all be incorporated. But you want to make sure you knead it all so that it's kneaded. All the flour is kneaded substantially enough to become that really elastic to work that gluten up. Then you form a ball, be fairly smooth on top, and I put just a little bit of oil, not too much,